Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to have the kind of panel I do today. We have a very simple title in front of us which says the challenge of building rapid transport networks. But what really do we mean about the challenge of building rapid transport networks? And some of the things that we were discussing earlier is that at the end of the day, it's about making life easier, not just for the person who's driving a car, not just for someone who's riding a bus, or someone who's taking a metro and then changing the metro somewhere else and then probably taking another mode of transport. Also for everyone else who's in the city, whether it's a pedestrian or it's anyone else who's using any other form of transport, people who are living in the city, people who are coming from outside to work in the city, and people who are also traveling from the city to somewhere else to go to work or who live outside of the city. And it's interesting because when we're talking about transport networks, sometimes we also talk about it in isolation. I think it's something that is the nerves of the city in some way, and how can we actually make the experience and it's smarter and better for citizens. So I thought without much further ado, I'll start with Shreya, who will make her initial presentation and comments.
I'll start with some thought-provoking ideas. Like, we're all addicted to the idea of a car, that the car is going to redeem us. That's the future of the world. And when an entire city gets addicted, like Delhi has already, that's what happens. And then we think maybe we can solve it by making more and more and more roads like the Chinese have done, or the Thai people have done, or the Indonesians have done, and they've not solved it, nor have the developed countries solved it. And we think somehow we'll solve it by creating one level over the other of flyovers, and we'll solve the problem, and we still don't solve the problem. So at the end of the day, the problem is that we do not understand what the problem is. And we cannot solve obesity with bigger pants. You cannot cure obesity with bigger pants, and you cannot solve urban congestion with bigger roads. And unless we get that, we will not be able to make any step forward. That's where we need to start. So what are smart cities? Are these smart cities? Transportation essentially is not a technical problem. Transportation is a matter of public policy. Transportation is about what we as people want for ourselves. That's how we always see our streets. We somehow think that the car has the first right over a street. The truth is, the car is just one amongst equals. The car does not own the street. The car has its place. I'm not saying no cars, but it has its place. So public transportation. A very big important point to learn for us is that nowhere in the world has only a metro, and we are all fond of metro, but the metro alone doesn't solve the problem. We need buses. Like London, which has 1,800 kilometers of metro, 1,800 kilometers of metro still has only a third by metro and 2/3 by bus. So we need buses. And what's that? It's a bus, and that's called a BRT. And if you thought what you had in Delhi is a BRT, think again, because that's not BRT. This is what a BRT is. And if Delhi wants to make a BRT, it better make a better one. That's what Ahmedabad has done, and I'm proud that ITDP was involved in the project and helped create the right kind of BRT, and that's what we're doing in other cities. That's what the BRT looks like in Mexico City. It does a great job, but that's what we end up doing often in our streets. That's not a BRT, so please avoid mistakes like these. There's a quality standard that's set up. I can hand over some pieces of the standard. We need to create the right thing. And if you think we don't have enough space on the street, think about what that street space should be used for in the first place. Isn't it meant to be most efficiently used? And if it's meant to be most efficiently used, rather than building elevated roads which take as much space as what a BRT would take, but give a fourth or third of the capacity at 10 times the price, we still think that's better because we are addicted to this idea of a car. So we need to start thinking again. And that could be any street in any of our Indian cities. But that's not an Indian city, that's Mexico City. And that's not how it looks like now, because the city decided that people come first, and therefore it created that. Even on a small street, they decided that it's meant for a BRT, for people to walk and to take a bus, because their right comes first because the majority wins. So we need to start thinking again of car as an equal amongst one amongst equals, not as a special case. India is pathetically low in its availability of rapid transit. You see France has about 30 kilometers of rapid transit per million population, urban population. India is at 1.2. Even our co-countries, like co-developing countries like Brazil or China or Mexico or Colombia have actually way more than what we have, like 4 to 5 times more. And what's even more disastrous is that India is growing at a pathetically low rate. At the rate at which we are growing, if we want to reach China, forget about France, we will do it not in 2030, but in 2300. I'm serious. That's the rate at which we are doing our things. So we need to start thinking again about what we need. We cannot just focus on metro. Metros are great, but there's more than metro that we need to do in our cities. So we need something like 5,000 kilometers of BRT in our cities. We need 2 lakh buses. Not 2,000 buses, 2 lakh buses. We need 40,000 kilometers of footpaths, and we need 20,000 kilometers of cycle tracks in our cities. That's the game before us. And we're thinking too small right now. We need to think a bigger game. And if you can just give me just one more minute, I want to address the issue of parking. Because parking is such a misunderstood issue. That's the symbol of parking. But essentially what parking is this. It's a magnet. It's a magnet that attracts vehicles. It's a magnet that attracts vehicles and creates traffic congestion. We don't think that way, but that's the truth about parking. Parking creates traffic congestion. So the more parking we give, not just on the streets, but even in buildings, the more traffic jams we're going to have. And if we love traffic jams, let's build more parking. But if traffic jams is not what you want, stop building more parking and start building more transit. Rather than creating parking out of parks, which Delhi has already done, which is a disaster, we are going to end up like ghost towns. Let's not make ghost towns. And multi-story parking is not going to solve the problems. Let's think again. We need to be clear that parking is not a constitutional right. It's exactly like a person buys the air conditioner and goes out to the government and says, listen, I bought the air conditioner, you give me the house. I bought the air conditioner, you give me the house. That's precisely what we do with parking. I bought the car, you give me the parking. And I don't want just one parking, I want 3 parking. I want one at my house, one at my office, and one at the recreation center. That's about 800 square feet. That's about 3 times more than EWS housing unit. So 3 families could live in the space that 1 car needs in a city. So we need to start thinking again. We need to price parking, and if there's more demand, then that price has to be higher. It's like how market functions, just closing now. And we need to use all that money to create better streets. We cannot have streets like this. There's a conflict between walking and parking, and we need to be clear what gets priority. And that's what the city of Chennai has already done. It's recreated pedestrian paths. It's thinking people first, not cars. And that's what cities across the world are doing. They don't build parking. These buildings, which are the biggest buildings in Europe, do not have parking. Closing now. High density does not create congestion. We need to turn the pyramid around. We need to start thinking different. We need to create cities which prioritize walking, cycling, and transit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I like to just say that car drivers don't have it easy either. We were discussing earlier that it's great to have a BRT that works, but not the kind of BRT that we had in Delhi, which made it, and I'd like now Dr. Singh to make his comments, please.
Namaskar. Most of our big cities and even the medium-sized cities are characterized by heavy congestion, heavy level of pollution, poor safety records in the city, and the most important, the average speed on major roads in cities is in single digit somewhere. So it's really a very pathetic situation. But I think the solution lies in public transport system. And when I say public transport system, please note, I don't say only metro. It has to be a well thought, well integrated mix of all possible ways of public transport system, and anything which works should be done. Another factor which has added, I would like to mention about the number of cars in the city. The easy finance and most important is the prestige attached to owning a car in our country. That has led to this large number of cars on the road. So I think these are some of the challenges. The fact that Delhi Metro has been very successful, the CRRI conducted a study, and all the benefits like saving in time, saving in greenhouse gas emissions, saving in life, improving safety on road, this has been worked out in terms of money, and the return is as high as 23%. That means the entire investment is back to the society in just 4.5 years' time. So this is a very positive thing. And with this success, many more cities in the country, 8 or 9 cities are already constructing metro, and many more are planning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. It reminds me of someone who just said something at a previous conference on smart cities, saying that smart transportation is, and also the way we plan our cities is, they were quoting the former mayor of Bogota saying that it's not where the poor buy more cars, but it's where the rich take public transport. And I think that is ultimately the kind of outcome that we are looking at. Now I'd invite Mr. Obale. I know he also would, perhaps you would also like to add about the role of technology, also the role of partnerships in the way that we are planning and building our.
Urban transport actually is a way of growing cities in an economically viable form. So one of the very famous urbanists, Jane Jacobs, actually had said that cities are actually wealth of nations. And Mumbai is definitely one of the preeminent cities which contributed, which has an area of about 2%, 20% population contributes about 40% of the state GDP. So in terms of lending efficiencies to the cities, obviously urban transport makes a huge impact. The second is, which is to my mind one of the single biggest contributions that the DMRC has done for the life of these people in Delhi, is to actually regain human dignity. So people had to travel in difficult circumstances. Even today in Mumbai, people travel in fairly difficult circumstances. I think DMRC has been able to transform that. What that does to the psyche of the people, and in that changed psyche, how do people contribute to the city, is something that I don't think we've even started understanding or putting a value to that. The third is land is a very scarce commodity. What urban transport does is helps you densify the land mass, which is a very, very significant contribution to this. So to my mind, I think in terms of future, if at all, and today India is an aspiring country, we would like to, one of the reasons why people acquire cars is also because it's an aspirational population now. And people are aspiring for world standards. And I think there's nothing wrong in aspiring for those world standards. If that is the case, I think this is a solution for the future. In terms of challenges, let me just, because that's the theme of what we have. And since a large part of my experience has been with the city of Mumbai, to my mind, I think one of the big challenges for the cities is that probably we don't have a unified transport authority. London, for example, the mayor directly controls something called Transport for London. And all the other modes of transport actually come within a unified authority, which then looks at person at the center of this entire debate of transport. It's not about creating a metro, it's not about creating a BRTS, it's about making life of an individual a lot more comfortable, a lot more efficient, a lot more manageable. And that's what I think we need to create amongst all cities, when we create a unified transport authority or a mechanism to that effect, so that we can put an individual to the center of all that we are trying to do.